Hi everyone, I hope you're good guy. Welcome to a new video. So today we're gonna talk about music production and my last EP release on Planet Rhythm. And I asked you what you wanted me to talk about in terms of sound design, but you asked me as well some music production questions. So I'm gonna answer all of that today as well in this video. So the first question was kind of how do you know when to start a track, or how do you start a track basically, and like how come the inspiration. And mainly my inspiration come from landscape, I would say. Like I have image of a picture of a landscape in my head, and I'm kind of trying to set a mood for this picture. Like if you was working for a movie, let's imagine you have a scene in the movie and you need to put music on that scene. You have to create something, and that's kind of my approach. So I have this picture in my head and I'm saying, okay, I need to do something in this direction, and I have two mainly elements that we'll kind of use as guideline. It's first, I will, before starting music, make this track, I will know what kind of kick I will use. If I want something more deep, kind of 808 kick, if I want something more industrial, more rapid, or more something more like a rumble, or if I want something more hypnotic techno raw kick with a rumble, maybe I don't want a rumble, maybe I want to kick with a tom. I more or less have an idea of how my kick will sound. And usually the second element is what's gonna set the mood of the track. So that's something as well you ask, like how do you set your mood and how do you basically know? And this is something as well which will depend. There is some of kind of pattern that repeat the kind of track I'm making. Sometimes it's gonna be more like it will be a pad sound, so like something a pad which is making a melody, and then after we just have a synth element, so the pad is gonna set the mood. Sometimes it will be more like something hypnotic, so I will always like to have something more in the background to set the mood, and then after having synth line melody hypnotic playing as the main lead on top of that. Or sometimes it will be just having not really a mood, so to speak, but just having like using one synth line, one synth hook as main lead only, and then just put a kick on it, and this will be like a more banger track. Usually this kind of track I don't really have a mood, I just want to make a track to make people dance basically. So all of these kind of different elements, I have them before to start the track, and it doesn't mean that I will always follow them, but it's my guideline for starting the track. So I will always start with the drums and the rumble, either with tom or with a bass line or with a reverb. It really depends, sometimes combination of both. And I will put my drums as well. And once I have this solid bass, I will always, usually most of the time, try to look for the mood of the track. And this can be a synth. So let's jump into Ableton for this track, which is my Not Trusted track. You asked me about how I create this track, and this is basically what set the mood of the track. And then after you have the lead coming later, but you still have this kind of synth in the background, and that's really what set the mood. And this is kind of I like to do that, it's kind of very hypnotic synth. And to get this kind of sound, what I've done here, I'm just gonna deactivate everything. And so I use my Sanju Synthshot, and these are the notes. So you can see it's playing very low notes, but like this you get this basic granular sound, but that I'm gonna filter with a high pass, and that's what's gonna give first a nice character to it. Okay, it's quite hard to hear without the reverb, so I'm gonna activate the delay, which you see here I use the reverb inside the echo, so it's what really gives the character as well. And with the EQ, so here you can see there is some modulation with the EQ. There is two things going on. You first have one LFO which is sweeping the frequency like this from left to right. And you have another one which is a square waveform, which is basically activated on and off this EQ basically. You can see this toggle on off. So they both have different rates. So this way it's like kind of always changing, and it's never always synchronized. And what can give as well is kind of hypnotic things always evolving basically and always changing. And then I have an autopan which is kind of making the sound moving a little bit from the left to the right. And another reverb like kind of. And then auto filter again. It's gonna filter, and again there is a LFO which is modulating again a different rate than the two other. And altogether that's what this really was putting kind of more in the background. And yeah, again another EQ. So yeah, that's for the mood setting. And then when I have that and I have my drums, I can start to look for a lead. So the lead for this track, I will show you probably in another video. I use the Mini Brute. And here in terms of kick, I have just this kick. I don't have rumble, and the kick is a resample kick. And then I have tom here, which is kind of percussion with some pitch modulation, EQ, overdrive, delay, reverb. I'm not gonna spend too much time on that. It's just to show you. If you want, you can just pause the video and check. And then I have the bass here. I use my tom rubber rack, so I have this tom pattern here, and with this tom, with my tom rumble, which is basically kind of sending a tom into a lot of reverb, and basically how like you will send your kick, except you use a tom. It's kind of different a little bit, and yeah, that's how I create the groove. And then after I have the ambience. And then the second things as well you talk about is more like the texture that I've put in the background as well. And here you can see you have some of them here, this 3-track. So what I like this is something I like to do personally, but it's like always having noise or texture or stuff going around your head. And so yeah, the best way, this is like more kind of a wavetable that I've used. But the best way to do that is, again, having a lot of LFO modulating, whatever. It can be like here, like a high pass filter. Here as well, you can see it's modifying the FM pitch. It's modifying as well the high pass filter here again. You have the pitch, which is slightly changing. This is more like kind of a small changement. This 3 device, auto filter, frequency shifter, auto pan. Auto pan is gonna slightly change the volume a little bit. Frequency shifter slightly change the pitch, and auto filter slightly filter, high pass filter your track. What I decide to choose, like I said, is either something like I will have like an idea of something a bit percussive, but it has to be like very high in the frequency and very minimalistic, because you don't want it to take too much space on your spectrum. You just want something like very little tiny things, which is you're gonna make it go around your head. And then after you can do the same with some noise. So here I think it's an audio loop, but you can hear it's a basic. Here I just have this delay. It's kind of going crazy. You cannot really hear it what it's doing, but if I wanted to make a rack about this stuff because it's kind of a crazy delay stuff, but it's kind of basically modulating the time, the feedback, and creating very weird effect, but it doesn't really hear them on the track on the end. So, and yeah, usually I will always high pass, put on the stereo. Sometimes I will have an auto pan to make it go from the left to the right. And another way I create, here's another trick I do usually, is you take a sawtooth waveform basically, and if you play in the low pitch, you get this kind of, obviously you're gonna get this low note, but it's sounding very granular. And when you high pass this, like you can see here, I heavily high pass here with the filter, with the EQ here, and there is another one there. And when you high pass this sawtooth, it's where you get this very tiny granular sound. And then after it's just a bit of distortion, delay, reverb, auto pan making go to the left and right. Auto pan always try to have different rates from one noise, one ambience to another. Sometimes you can have two the same, but maybe invert the phase here. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this track and for like how to set the mood or all the texture background that you ask as well. So here is my track Abnegation, and here I have obviously a different mindset than the previous track. Before I started, I just wanted like kind of to make a banger, so I didn't have any picture in my head or whatsoever. I just wanted to make a track that is heavily dance floor oriented, like kind of a peak time moment, let's say. So I started usually with the kick. So I usually resample my kick because usually I layer and like I kind of resample them to reprocess them. So I don't have the original, but the kick is, you have this original kick that you can see is like a bit of rumble already. And this king punch rack to kind of make it cut through the mix. And then you have this tom which is not really a bass line, but kind of help with the groove. And then I have drums. So like I said, usually I will start like this, and then for this kind of track, which are more like banger oriented, I will after look for a lead. And here I still have some element, obviously, to... Here I have this 3 kind of synth stuff, which are like sounds popping here and there. I use my rack. I'm not gonna explain them because they're not that important, but this is like kind of synth here and there a little bit to kind of... And then you again have some ambience. So here the ambience is kind of like a second lead, like not a second lead, but it's very important as well because it helps to don't get the track too monotonous. So you have this one, which is an audio loop as well, because that probably was from the MIDI brute and I kind of frozen and... But yeah, I can show you how it... Just pitch it. You have a LFO modulation on the pitch. The autopan here, I use it because the panman is because the autopan was not enough for me like to make it move around. I like to use panman because the autopan from Ableton is a bit limited. And yeah, this is kind of what helps with the groove as well and set the tone. Straight away you have something with this sound, you have something a bit sounding more industrial and more like a mechanical. You could hear like synth as well going from the left to the right. This is the synth high, synth growl, and synth industrial. It's like this kind of synth who's gonna pop here and there during the track just to keep things interesting. And you have this ambience probably hooking later. So I think that's from the recording of my microphonic sounds box. I make a video about it. And I've resampled it. I just modulate the gain, but it's sound like this, so all together. But at that point you already have the main lead. So the main lead playing is this one. So this is a interesting one because you can see it's my synth brass rack, which is basically by default kind of a melodic techno rack. But like I usually say, and I try to say it as much as I can on my channel, always experiment with things even if a rack you think is not fitting for you, because here's what it sounds. So obviously I need to activate the arpeggiator, but even with the... That's how it sounds by default if I was dropping the rack. But I've made some changements. First I removed the noise, and I wanted to use the other filter to kind of high pass as well, because I told you high passing sound can really add character as well, especially when you drop into reverb after. So I need to change the algorithm and put it in like this. So this way it's going through filter 1, then filter 2, and then after 2 the amplitude envelope. And this I want a high pass filter, so I'm gonna play. And remove the envelope. And this I'm gonna map to the brass macro because it's where I map it. And I change, this was no map. Second important thing is I bring it to mono and bring the glide. And already you can hear you have something which is... So then you have the saturator as well. I think I change and I've put one in hard curve mode. And I add another EQ. Up like... me change the reverb. Now you get something. Because the thing is, I had an idea more or less the type of sound I wanted, and I wanted something like kind of a squeaking sound, something I knew have to add like some kind of a little bit pitch modulation, you see. So I know this end brass had this pitch modulation by default. This brassy effect basically, you see, was like this pitch modulation. On the end, I didn't keep it, and I used the glide, which is kind of similar effect to this pitch modulation, because the glide is a pitch between two notes, and the fact I bring the glide to this rack kind of created this squeaking effect, and then I just accentuate with the high pass filter. Yeah, that's another way I like to use my rack sometimes, is because it's a good starting point. You don't have to start from scratch, and you say, okay, this rack sounds a little bit like this, so I think I can maybe bring it here and to get this kind of sound if I tweak this or that. And so I'm just gonna drop the rack, experiment. Sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes you say, okay, no, actually it was a bad idea. But sometimes like here it works, and it's creating something cool. And yeah, that's the whole track. And yeah, let's jump into the next track now. This is my grinding track. Okay, so this kind of track, the mindset and the mood is more like, okay, I don't really have any things in mind, and I'm just gonna create a groove, and I will pick up maybe the mini Brute 2S and try to find something going on top, so which sound like this. So here I don't have much to say, because the thing is, the lead and the main synth, two main elements have been created with the mini Brute 2S. If I still have the picture of the preset, I will do a video about it like I said I would do with the previous one. But yeah, here what I've done is I had this sequence that I've created with the mini Brute 2S, and then after I just record part, and you can see I chopped. I just like, basically I was jamming. I had my bass, again my bass, my kick and my drums playing, and I was just jamming with the mini Brute 2S until I press record, and I start to keep jamming to have like an idea, okay, I'm gonna do something for this part, this part, this part. And you can see I've kind of, after chopped and put things together. Yeah, and it's the same. I know you asked for this synth as well, but that was the original. Kind of weird, kind of pitch modulation as well. Then saturation, delay, reverb, and fuzz. And the lead, I used a bit repeat to sometimes add a bit of variation, but then it's if I remove quite a lot of effect. It was kind of an acidic sound. Yeah, bright key is just like, this is like, if you're familiar with my video, you know it's like a corpus preset that I used to kind of make things a bit brighter. Wave shaper, another clip, just a high pass filter, delay, reverb. So G37, if you watch my video about which shot party plugin I use, I like to use G37 because it adds a bit of, it's a tape emulation plugin, and it adds a bit of warmth, and so I found it decent, a little bit cold and not really fitting the track, so adding this to plugin was kind of helping give a bit of warmth. But yeah, I hope I have still the original preset, and like this I can make a video about it. And yeah, there is not much going on after. It's like, so here for the groove I'm just gonna show quick, I use my industrial kick. And again, it's a kick I resample, because obviously usually when I layer after, I kind of freeze and flatten or resample it, and then after I put it in this rack, it's easier. And yeah, just my industrial rack. Like this. It's kind of squash it a little bit, but yeah. Then hats, I'm not talking about hats, because check any video I talk about template and I talk about hats, you will find how I usually set my hats. It's more or less always the same. A bit of snare. Yeah, here I have if you're into this kind of distorted snare, usually the best way is you layer snare, trying to have some noisy snare as well. and you can use maybe other kind of weird percussion. Then I use frequency shifter to kind of pitch it in the weird way. And the main thing here is, well, obviously hard curve, but it's more like gain things. And then pedal with the first mode really kind of same done with the Synth one. Basically it's really what gives this grid growling effect. So if you are into this kind of effect, use pedal with the fuzz or any kind of fuzz distortion. And then you have just Perc I, which is again, this is like classic things I like to use. This is the MIDI and percussion with this rack I've made as well. And yeah, done. Alright, and the next track of the EP was Forgotten Thought. So here the mindset was the same than the first one. I have something in mind already. I know that I wanted something very atmospheric, a bit more melodic, and with a deep kick, like more like kind of round deep kick, not something heavy or not something soft melodic, and a bit ambient techno, like deep techno, these kind of things. So I had already this in my mind, and I already like knew where I wanted to go, like having this kind of pad or drone in the background evolving, and then after putting stuff on top. I didn't really exactly what to put on top, but I had this idea of this deep kick and this ambient pad on the background. And for this one, so the main idea was the kick in tom. So that's what the groove I wanted from the beginning. And so here the kick is just normal kick with a rumble here, and the tom basically, the kick and the tom basically always set the mood as well already a little bit if you both together. And the tom is quite funny enough how I create them, because I use a loop. So that was the show, but the loop is pitched down 7 semitones. So basically that was the original loop, and I say, okay, why not two? Probably I like it how it was, but I say, okay, maybe it needs to be pitched down because it was too in the high and was sounding like too cheesy. And I say, okay, let's pitch it down. So why minus 17? The kick is in B, and the tom, if you check the main frequency here, it's gonna be in B as well. So I've minus 5 semitones. So like this is like kind of the fifth, but an octave down. And I bring down an octave as well down again. So minus 5 to get the fifth on one octave under, but as well minus 12 to get another octave down. So minus 17. That's how you get the groove going on. And so that was my first thing I had in mind. And second thing was this ambient. So this I use my amp rack, my drone rack with the pad maker. So this is like 2 rack perfectly to get this kind of sound. And let me go here. But the note is 1 note C playing at 2 different octaves. And then after it's all about the rack, how I set it. As you can see, the oscillator 1 is at +2, the oscillator 2 is at +7. And the space between oscillator 1 and 2 is changed a little bit from what it is by default. And yeah, that's what you get. This rack by default, this sound, a bit of detune as well. And then the pad maker, you have some flanger, as you can hear, to add a bit of modulation. So the amount is changing of flanger, but... And yeah, that's really what set the mood, and that's what basically I had in my mind. And then after I just built things on top. So then after it was more or less like according to the inspiration of the moment. I didn't really have precise idea, but yeah, then what I would usually do is building the drums. So here I use loops, because I use usually loops when I want things to go fast, and I say, okay, things need to keep moving, so I will use loops for my drums. It's just work. And yeah, Perc. Here again is a loop. Here what I've got. Here again I will do my Perc loop, similar to the previous track. See, if you want to know about this MIDI pattern and how to use this track, I will put the link in the description. I explain that in the video. I always use the same kind of pattern, and I explain you how, as well, how you can create your own and experiment a bit with. Here's another way to see how I take a rack out of his context. See, this was more like a kind of tell of us melodic techno kind of plug that I have pitched down. So it's kind of sounding a bit like a weird synth percussive effect. Yeah, here something interesting is what I've called random perc. So I use this Euclidean sequencer and it's triggering this 4 perc. So I've made a video about this sequencer. I will put the link in the description as well. And you can really, because of Euclidean rhythm, it's kind of it's not random, but it's kind of random. And I will have this 4 perc playing from time to time. And I have this auto pan as well, which is in a random, but which means like sometimes it's gonna be on the left, sometimes on the right, sometimes more in the middle. Yeah, all of this going into delay and reverb to really put them in the background. But yeah, it's kind of random where it play and when. Then I have this key, which is the main lead. So this is kind of a classic square waveform, so plus width, so it's like kind of a narrow square with a low pass filter. So yeah, dynamic tube and dub chord. So usually if as the main lead I would not put that much effect, that much delay and reverb, but because of the track you have this very ambient kind of vibe. I wanted to put more everything in the background and more like into a lot of reverb because it just fits better than if I was doing something more dry with less delay and less reverb. So this way it's kind of merging with the background as well. And then you have another track here, which is lead Moog. So I recorded from my Moog, but it's basically a very simple track. If I'm just copying the effect, here let me play actually like this. It's a very basic patch to make. Then you have a bit of modulation, but to create this kind of grab a wavetable and grab a sawtooth. So if it's a Moog, you can go to your filter, take the Prodigy one, 24 dB. Maybe add a bit of drive, sawtooth, and the main thing is to bring it in mono and add a bit of glide, let's say around 60%, and you got something very close to what I've created. And yeah, then you have this texture too. So again, that I've said before with the texture and the stuff in the background, you can see here's exactly the same process. Something very noisy, high pass filter, a bit of pitch, then it's distortion, another high pass filter. Not sure what this does, but probably like make it moving around a little. Auto pan as well, making moving around. Delay, reverb. This is as usual. So yeah, that's it for the tracks. If you have any other questions, do not hesitate, put them in the comment. I would not mind to make another video answering them. And thank you very much for watching, guys. See you soon. Bye bye.